how we doing? It is finally time for our first monthly wrap up of 2025, and I don't know about you guys, but this month has been so slow. Like, it genuinely feels like it's been a million days. Now, one of my goals this year is to try and prioritize quality instead of quantity. That's not to say that I'm not going to have months where I do read 15, 20 books. It just means that I'm not going to be racing through the books in order to be able to kind of hit that magic number. I really want to take my time with the books that I know I'm going to enjoy and not worry about an end goal. We're going to kick off with some Storygraph stats. Now, I do use both Goodreads and Storygraph, but Goodreads is where I mostly post like my written reviews, and then Storygraph I use for a more accurate kind of reading stats and star ratings, and I absolutely love it. I think it's brilliant. If you're not on it, you should get on it. So I read 5 books this month. That totaled 2,259 pages, and on average it took me 11 days to finish a book, which is quite slow for me. I think one of my favourite Storygraph chats is this mood board. I do find that 9 times out of 10, my top categories are always emotional, dark and adventurous, which obviously means that I have a type. My average rating for this month is 3.9 stars. Now, I must admit, usually I am a 5-star queen because I'm just quite easily pleased and end up handing them out like candy, really. But towards the end of last year, I read a couple of incredible God tier books, and because I handed out so many 5 stars, it felt like 5 wasn't good enough. So that's another thing that I'm going to be trying to do this year, because I feel like I need to be far more conscious about my star rating. Now, I'm probably still going to throw away 4 stars on any books that I love, even if it's just vibes, but 5 stars, I really want to make that precious to me. Anyway, let's get to the books. And as always, my reviews are always spoiler free unless I give you a warning first, then it is safe to proceed. So the first book I read this month was Lightlark by Alex Astor. Now, I'm not going to lie, I had really mixed feelings going into this book because I had seen so many really good reviews, but the negative ones that I did see were like bad. So let's talk about what it's about. Every 100 years, the island of Lightlark appears for only 100 days to host a deadly game where the rulers of 6 realms fight to break their curses and win unparalleled power. Each ruler has something to hide, and each curse is uniquely wicked, and to break them and save themselves and their realms, one ruler must die. My main issue with this, to start with, is that I actually think that is really deceptive. It's not essentially how the story goes, and there's a lot of contradictions in there. For me personally, this just ended up being another one of those books that's obviously a Hunger Games wannabe, and it had one of the worst love triangles I've ever read. The characters were all pretty unlikable and unbearable, and nothing really happened. Like, the high stakes were really silly and almost kind of non-existent. And as a whole, that just ended up meaning that it fell flat for me. So yeah, it got 2 stars instead of 1 because I laughed sometimes. Next up is Modern Divination by Isa Agajanian, I think is how you say it. I read this one as an ARC and I absolutely loved it. It follows Aurelia and Teddy, and they are rivals at Cambridge University. This is set in an alternate version of our world where witches are still hunted for their magic. And Aurelia has been hiding the fact that she's a green witch for as long as she can remember, her entire life. And then her and Teddy end up having to go on the run from a witch hunter who's trying to track them down. Teddy takes her to this remote cottage in the middle of nowhere. And that's kind of where we really get to know the characters. This was brilliant. I feel like it's Rivals done right, and it feels like a cozy dark academia, but with the high stakes in there. The writing and the atmosphere were just beautiful and second to none, and the romance was so all-consuming. It has everything that I love in a book, and we've got kind of like the dark academia vibes. It's like tense, forced proximity. It's full of banter, and it's just such a beautifully torturous slow burn. So this one got 4.5 stars from me. The only reason I didn't give it the full 5 stars is the pacing was ever so slightly off, but that is just me being pernickety, and I think everybody who is a fan of dark academia and kind of witchy romances, and especially if you love like howl coded love interests, you're gonna eat this one up. Then I read The Baby Dragon Cafe by A.T. Qureshi. This is super cute. This follows Saphira and Aiden. Saphira has just opened a little cafe where trainers and dragon families can bring their baby dragons and sit, relax, socialize. And then we have Aiden, who is the local gardener. He is a reclusive, shy man, doesn't really spend any time with anyone, but is known as the town's local heartthrob. Aiden then enlists Saphira's help in order to help train his baby dragon, Sparky, and it goes from there. When I tell you that this is the perfect little cozy palate cleanser book, I'm obsessed. I will definitely say it's on the low stakes, almost no stakes side of cozy fantasy, but I loved it. It is essentially a hot latte and a warm hug in the form of words on a page. There was no stressing in this book, no worries, just a lot of smiling while I was reading it. Aiden as a character really reignited my love for shy boys, and then we have Saphira, and I feel like she was the perfect example of how to be an independent, strong main female character who can still be soft and still be gentle and still be girly, and I ate it up. 3.75 stars from me. Then I finally picked up Babel by R.F. Kuang. It's going to come to no surprise to anybody, I think, that has read this, that this is my book of the month. I was putting this one off for a really long time, partly because it intimidated me, but also because I didn't want to finish it. I knew I was going to love this book, but it is the perfect example of reading a book when the time was right. In Babel, we essentially follow Robin Swift. He is a young boy in Canton when, after his mother passes away from cholera, a professor turns up and says, look, I'm going to take you to England. I will train you. I will educate you. You will go to Oxford University. You will have a good life. And he, being a young boy with nothing else to do, agrees. And then we basically follow him as he attends Oxford in the Babel department, which is their translation department. This is a god tier book. It was exquisite and painful and beautiful, and I can't stop thinking about it. I definitely think it's more magic realism over fantasy, but that worked for a story that I feel is so steeped in truth and fact. And it's one of those books that while I was reading it, it just fed my brain. I've read a lot of reviews where people said they didn't like it because it reads too much like a textbook. And while I do agree with that, I loved that. I loved that side of it. And it definitely leans into that kind of academic style of writing, but it just fit so perfectly for the story. It was fascinating and layered and dense and scholarly and just brutally painful and heartbreaking. And I just think it's a book that I think everyone should read once in their lifetime. This was an easy 5 stars for me and one of my favourite books of all time. As far as I am concerned, R.F. Kuang can do no wrong. I finished off the month with Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, I completely ate this up. I'm not gonna summarise this one because I do feel like it will spoil Fourth Wing and Iron Flame for anybody who hasn't kind of got there and had a chance to read that one yet. But this one was definitely my favourite. Now, Rebecca isn't necessarily the best writer. I do feel like that we're seeing her grow as each book comes out and each new book is released. But she's not the best, but I feel like the story makes up for it. I'm always going to be a dragon person, and the dragons in this book are some of my favorites of all time. I really love the politics of the world and I love the magic system. And then in this particular book, the ending, I was shook. And I kid you not, guys, I like picked up my book and threw it. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Do I love it anyway? Yes, I do. This one ended up getting a 4.25 star rating from me. And I will kid you not, like at least 3 of those are for vibes alone. So that was everything that I managed to read in January. I do love that it was such a mix of books. They're all quite different from each other. In terms of February, I don't really do TBRs. I am way too much of a mood reader. But I do want to end this with maybe a book that I'm hoping to get to in February. I am currently reading 2 books as we speak. We Used to Be Magic by B. Ingalls, which is a really cute, emotional romance. I'm also reading Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner, which is the sequel to Godkiller, and I'm really enjoying this one so far. One book I am absolutely desperate to read this month is the sequel to Feybound. This is Cursebound. So I read Feybound last year, completely fell in love with the world. So the first book, Feybound, is set in a world where we're following 2 elven sisters. There used to be humans, but humans are now extinct, and the Fey all disappeared. Something happens to the main character, Yirin, who is one of the sisters, and she gets exiled from the elven lands. Then we have her sister, Lettel, who is trying to make it as a diviner, and doesn't want to leave her sister, so follows her sister. And they accidentally stumble upon what should be completely impossible, which is the Fey Court. They start learning a whole lot about this. Now, this, I would classify this as romantic fantasy. I think the fantasy comes first and the romance comes second, but there is every kind of romance that you could possibly want in this. It's so representative, but the main and most beautiful romance in this is sapphic, and I absolutely love it. I have been so excited to read Cursebound, and I cannot wait. This actually comes out at the end of February, so keep an eye out for that. Let me know what your favourite book of January was in the comments, and I will be back very, very soon with another video.